Hello and welcome to the Outside the Cockpit Monaco GP post-race show. My name is Sam Donzig. I'm joined with by TJ, Ming, and Julian. How you guys doing today?
Pretty good. How are you?
Oh, doing pretty well. Not too bad on a holiday Monday. It was a somewhat exciting race. We did get to see some overtaking, but of course that got taken away from us because of the F1 TV director and that decision. But we're not going to talk about that much further. What are your quick thoughts on the race on Sunday? Just kind of quick 2 cents on that. Anything
fun? Obviously, this might be one of the most difficult races to explain to a non-F1 fan as to what made it interesting, because I'm pretty sure this is the first Grand Prix in so long that apart from the first lap, we did not see any actual on-track passes, it seemed. Obviously the race director robbed us of a lot of things, but most of the overtaking happened based off of pit stop strategy, traffic. And the only move that I can even think of actually being a dive bomb or an actual pass was the bottleneck that turn one is on lap one, and the move that Mick Schumacher did on Mazepin into the lowest hairpin. So on the first lap, both super early on in the Grand Prix, but since then we didn't really see much overtaking. But the one thing that was interesting about this Grand Prix, which I personally just loved, is there was a lot of new faces in the front, and we saw people struggle to really get through. Hamilton struggled throughout the Grand Prix to get past Gasly, and we've seen even in past years with traffic and everything, Hamilton's still able to at least find a way through, whether it be at the Nouvelle chicane, at the Lowe's hairpin, into Raskas. He always finds a move, and it was really weird to see that Hamilton couldn't do that. And seeing this as a single file race could come off as boring. In some points, it was pretty boring. I'm not going to lie. It was. But, with pit stops, there was enough drama during the Grand Prix that didn't depend on overtaking. And it just kind of showed that what makes Monaco interesting is just seeing how hard these drivers can push. And we definitely saw that in the Grand Prix.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into race strategy later. But let's just start talking about the race results. Let's go through. So obviously at the start of this, we got Max Verstappen, obviously race winner. Carlos Sainz getting a podium along with Lando Norris. A podium that you rarely see because you used to seeing just, Verstappen, Hamilton, Bottas. Perez finished fourth, which is nice. Vettel finishing fifth, which was a high finish for Aston Martin himself. Gasly, Hamilton, Stroll, Ocon, Giovinazzi, Raikkonen, Ricciardo, Alonso, Russell, Latifi, Tsunoda, Mazepin, Schumacher, Bottas, and Leclerc. Obviously DNF. They didn't actually start the Grand Prix, so he was already in 20th place there. Let's move on to the race start. Actually, I just want to talk about that because honestly, Max Verstappen had a great getaway right at the beginning. He covered Bottas well. Obviously, Bottas got a great start. Let's start with you, TJ. What are your thoughts on that race start from both Verstappen and Bottas as well?
Well, it's interesting because you could see because Leclerc was no longer starting on pole position because of that. I think it was a drive shaft failure. So you could see Verstappen. He was starting in P2, but it was effectively pole because Leclerc was no longer there. So you could see that he had sort of turned the car a little bit towards the right to cover off a potentially good start for Bottas, which was exactly what happened. Bottas did get the better start, but Verstappen had covered him off by positioning his car a little bit to the right. And like Julian said, pretty much all the racing is done into turn one. Into Saint-Avold right off the start because this is such a tight track, tight, twisty, slow track. That's really where you get all the action right off the start other than the pits. So it was a move that he had to do because Hamilton was obviously further down the grid, out of position. So he had to get a good start, and that's exactly what happened.
Yes, indeed. What about you, Julian?
One thing. The interesting thing is if you watch how it was set up, Verstappen literally telegraphed that he was going to block off Bottas. So obviously Leclerc's not there, and if Leclerc was there, Verstappen would not be able to sweep across the track the way that he did to cover off the inside. I feel like if Leclerc was there, he would have been able to challenge on the outside. He got that good of a start. However, if you look how he was set up before he ended up taking off, the car was already angled so where he didn't have to steer, but the car would already automatically go trajectory-wise in the path of Bottas, forcing Bottas to either get into a collision, which would have been nasty, into that first, or have to pull off and tuck in behind. Very, very smart from Verstappen. Really just shows that he's one of the best that we have on the grid right now at getting the car off the line. Bottas had a great start. And Sainz did not have the best of starts, but he was able to keep everyone at bay. So that was solid for him. But just very, very smart from Verstappen. He saw Leclerc isn't here. I have a chance to close the door on the inside on Bottas in the case that if he does get a good start, which he did, and that's exactly how it happened. He was able to telegraph it across, and honestly, great move from Verstappen there. It just shows that he's really grown as a driver since his introduction into the sport.
Yes, indeed. And what are your thoughts, Ming, on that race start?
I got a lovely reaction and just say nice, and just see like he goes that way and then just block Bottas and just keep going. I'm like, nice. So we keep it up. Pretty intense. I'll say pretty intense the whole cat and mouse chase until that incident. We'll probably talk about later in the episode. But yeah, overall, really show that how grown he is with Verstappen. And he has admitted that like he's been having a lot of memories with Monaco and every barrels he hits in every GP, right? And now it's just very well, really great race from him.
Yeah, indeed. I would agree. I think when you look back at obviously his crash in 2016 with I'm trying to think who he crashed with back in it was like first time Monaco. Obviously he crashed out, but yeah, I feel like he's really matured as a driver and he's got much better. It was a great race start. He had to do exactly. I'm just going to kind of repeat the points. I don't want to repeat the points that you guys had already said, but yeah, both drivers got the great start, but just Max just got the better start and just covered off the inside line, which is what he was supposed to do. All right, let's move on to the race strategy. Obviously, Red Bull kind of outdueled Mercedes here in Monaco. Let's get our thoughts here. What are you thinking on the strategy difference between Red Bull and Mercedes? Let's start with you, Julian.
See, that's where it comes into play, because it isn't so much how they handled Verstappen. Verstappen, since the opening flag, like barring absolute catastrophic pit stop, like the race was basically his. We all knew that going into it. It just seemed like it was going to be that way. And one can't exactly blame Mercedes for what happened to Valtteri Bottas, because that's a mistake that's happened. It's more of a mechanical problem with the gun rather than what the pit crew actually is able to do. It wasn't a miscommunication or anything. It's just that the nut ended up it got shaved off due to miscommunication with how they put it on before the start of the Grand Prix. And, cross-threading is very, very painful for any team. It can literally happen to anyone. So that's not exactly goes against the Mercedes strategy. But if we're going to talk about direct strategy comparison, the only way you can compare it is Sergio Perez's race against Lewis Hamilton's race. And don't get me wrong, Hamilton had a solid Grand Prix when it came to his pace. Like I said, it was really weird to not see him overtake, but he had solid pace. But it just went to show that, once again, Hamilton knows more, and this can go for any driver. The driver on the track knows way more about how he feels in the car than the people on the pit wall. Because the pit wall was telling Hamilton to pit, he ended up obliging with it, but you could hear on the radio prior, Hamilton was saying, let's stay out for a bit. I feel like we can overcut. I think that's the only way we'll stay in front or get ahead of Gasly. Hamilton really felt like he had that pace still in the tires. Team didn't trust him in that. We saw how that ended up paying off, which it didn't. He ended up getting jumped by Vettel, by Perez, which, by the way, Red Bull very smart to keep him out, and they know Checo's very good at tire managing, so he was able to push towards the end of that first stint, and it really helped him hop in front of that train of Gasly and Vettel, both of which still remained in front of Hamilton. You could hear Hamilton's frustrations. They ended up putting it on the race director. I feel like that was very entertaining to hear. Race director didn't do a lot of things correct, but putting Lewis Hamilton to complain on the radio definitely was one of the more fun things to listen about in this Grand Prix. But yeah, that's really all I really have to say about it. Mercedes they didn't put faith in their driver, and for once we saw Red Bull actually trust their second driver, in this case being Perez, and it actually ended up paying off. So could this affect future decisions when it comes to strategy for Red Bull? Potentially, but we can also see potentially Mercedes just being, you know what, Lewis, you tell us how you're feeling and we'll oblige. Because, after a catastrophe like this, Lewis probably will not get on the same page when it comes to strategy again, unless he agrees with them from the jump.
No, exactly. 100% agree. What are your thoughts, TJ, on this?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you brought up the point about Sergio Perez jumping the field. Normally, the undercut works at pretty much every track, but this is a track where the overcut really is a viable option, and Red Bull used it to perfection. I think Sergio Perez, he started 8th after Leclerc dropped off. So he started off 8th. He jumped 4 places. The overcut worked really well.
He started 9th. Vettel started 8th, I believe.
Yeah, but that was because Leclerc.
After the Leclerc thing, yeah, I don't know. It's a weird situation there because
the
lineup didn't change with how they lined up on the grid. There was just an empty slot.
Yeah, because they couldn't bunch the field up. That's what Jonathan Wheatley was trying to get done before the race. That didn't happen. So
Yeah.
he started 8th on the road. And then he jumped up 4 places using the overcut. Red Bull was like the biggest top team to use the overcut, and it worked out very well. And I mean, you could also make the case that it worked for other teams as well. You know, you see Aston Martin; they used Vettel stayed out. Vettel stayed out, and he used the overcut. It worked really well for him, and he even said it on the radio after the race: "Good overcut." Or nice overcut. So, I mean, it was all, and Mercedes, they had no choice. They had to use the undercut because Hamilton and Bottas were having tire wear issues. So they had to come in first, and they said, okay, see if you can make the undercut work. But this track really is a delicate balance between trying to make the undercut or the overcut work, and that's really where it was decided. Red Bull used the overcut to perfection, and that's what got Verstappen the win and helped Perez jump the field as well.
Yes, indeed. What about you, man?
I mean, it's all, we all know what's happened when Bono just awkwardly tried to tell Lewis about the race after it, just complete silence. You know, it's also Monaco is also a good GP for for like race strategies, and it shows again that overcut works this time. Maybe next time undercut works, and maybe next GP, and that's my thought on it. Yeah,
and I would agree with all you guys. What's interesting as well, obviously, like one thing that, like, talking about the Bottas thing, that was not his fault. It was just, it was a bad situation, bad luck. But when it comes to terms of Hamilton literally said, it was like when he came out, it was like, oh, how was like Gasly, or how was like Vettel ahead of me? How was Perez ahead of me? Like, how did they all get ahead of me? And then, of course, the whole thing where he wanted to stay out again. Like, Lewis Hamilton is usually really good at expanding tire life, or like stretching out the tire life by like 10 or 15 laps. Just on any track, especially on Monaco as well, he's usually pretty good at that. But for whatever reason, they were just seeing something differently. They were looking at the data. That's what they look at, and that's what they trust. And sometimes you got to trust the driver instinct. It's like the eye test, not just the number test that you have to look at. And I would say that I think next time they learn from their mistake. And now what's interesting as well, that Lewis came out and said, we as a team didn't perform that well. And some people were commenting and stuff, and they were saying, well, like, no, technically, like, Bottas you just had a bad weekend, but Bottas did. But one thing that I noticed with Mercedes, that Mercedes has this whole with Niki Lauda, it's like, you win as a team and you lose as a team. And obviously, Bottas did end up getting DNF'd at the race, but regardless, they didn't have overall a great weekend, Mercedes, and I think they're gonna bounce back from it. They're gonna come strong in Baku, and it's just gonna make the title fight even more interesting, because now that Red Bull leads by 1 point for the first time since like 2013, I think that Red Bull was leading the championship. And then, of course, the first time that Max Verstappen is leading an F1 championship in his career. So, which I guess perfectly transitioned to our most impressive driver. Let's start with you, Ming. Who are your 1 to 2 drivers that really stood out for you on Sunday?
I was having a lot of hope for Carlos Sainz. So I think he's my most impressive driver. Nothing really much happened, but yeah, he was when on Saturday he was really, really frustrated with Verstappen, and he could have that pole, he could feel that was his lap, and I'm happy that you get that. But yeah, the entire podium is just 3 of them, probably like all 3 of them are very impressive as well, right? Verstappen hold himself, and really good strategy from Red Bull and Lando Norris, first podium in Monaco, baby. So it's awesome. They're all awesome, and I think that for my take, it's gonna be Carlos Sainz, but I think that Sebastian Vettel will be somewhere in our discussion.
Yes, indeed. All right, what about you, TJ?
Yeah, like Ming said, you could make a case for anybody who hit the podium. You could also throw in Sebastian Vettel in there as well. For me, it was Pierre Gasly. I said in the pre-race show that he's done very well at Monaco, and he did once again as well. He lost out to Seb Vettel when he came out of the pits, but he successfully kept Hamilton behind. And I mean, like you guys said, Hamilton usually finds a way to get past, even at Monaco, but he just couldn't for everything he tried yesterday. He just couldn't get past Gasly. So that says a lot more to me over over what Sainz and Lando did. And it's another case of him having fully rebuilt himself after being demoted from Red Bull in 2019. If Red Bull don't come calling again, which in all likelihood they probably won't, other teams will. And we've seen how drivers can rebuild themselves with science. He was dropped by the Red Bull program. He was dropped by Renault. He rebuilt himself at McLaren, and he's now a podium finisher at Monaco with Ferrari. So Gasly has nowhere to go but up as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you on that one. What about you, Julian? Who are your two drivers that stood out to you?
Oh, man. So really, there's one that's very obvious that we spoke about, which was the amazing drive Sergio Perez had from 9th to 4th, technically on the grid without counting the whole Leclerc situation. Everything was technically a 9th to 4th drive. So very, very good drive for him. Obviously, some of you guys have already mentioned Seb Vettel, but I want to talk about Vettel's teammate getting double points this season for the first time for Aston Martin. Lance Stroll started 13th, and he ended up finishing 8th. He had a very interesting Grand Prix because the race director seemed more focused on showing him cutting a chicane rather than what was happening with Vettel coming out. But all those memes aside, Stroll made one of the ballsier calls, so to say, in this Grand Prix, and it actually went his way. He ended up starting on the hard tires, which wasn't very common amongst anyone that started outside of the top 10. Most of them opted for the medium. Some of them opted for the softs. Stroll opted for the hard tires, and if we want to talk about the overcut with Perez and the overcut with Vettel, we need to talk about the overcut with Lance Stroll. He went a long time on those hard tires, and then he ended up changing, I believe, to the mediums at the end of the Grand Prix, and he held on for 8th. Yes, he got lapped, and obviously a lot of people would say that he wasn't as amazing, but when you go from 13th to 8th in Monaco, that is still a considerable jump. It's a double points finish for Aston Martin, even though everyone's talking about Vettel's amazing Grand Prix, which he had. I want to shine some light and show some love to the Canadian Lance Stroll. He had a good Grand Prix this weekend, so hats off to him.
Yeah, I would say my two drivers. I was thinking about this the other day when I was also doing my power rankings and stuff. I was thinking probably obviously the Carlos Sainz, he did well, and Seb Vettel would be another one. But I think definitely I'm gonna go agree with TJ. I think Pierre Gasly really stood out to me as finishing in P6. He showed some really strong pace. He was able to hold that. Hamilton behind him, who's a 7-time world champion. Even though it's Monaco, it's still very hard to do considering how close he was right at the beginning of the race and stuff. And considering as well, but what's interesting as well, I think one thing that might be considered is that as well with the Mercedes car is that the Mercedes car is built to be at the front and stuff. So when it's sitting in the middle of a pack, it's not usually that great as well when you think about it. But regardless, it's still hard to keep a guy like Hamilton behind you. So, shout out to Pierre Gasly. And it was interesting actually because at the end of the race, he talked to Christian Horner and stuff, and they were kind of having a conversation. I just thought that was interesting, because I was like, what's being said between them? Obviously because he's being very nice with him and stuff like that. But I just thought that would be interesting to share. But yeah, my most impressive driver would be Pierre Gasly. Shout out to him, man. I think also Lance Stroll as well. Lance Stroll, the Canadian boy, got to show love because anytime you move up positions in Monaco is always tough to do. But considering as well from 13th to 8th, going on the hard tires, which is, again, a bit of a bold strategy. Yeah, those are my impressive drivers for the week. Anything else you guys want to add or anything about that or no? Alrighty. Well, thank you very much for watching our show today. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out theadmissionsports.com for more content. And we will see you about a week and a half or so because we got the Baku Grand Prix coming up in Azerbaijan. So that should be definitely interesting. Another street circuit ahead of us. Alrighty, have a nice day. So.